I arrived at the corporate headquarters where my husband was the CEO to attend a board meeting. His executive assistant, parading around and claiming to be his fiancée, confidently announced she was firing me right in front of everyone. I didn't say a word, but my husband was so terrified he stood there frozen like a statue. I still remember that morning vividly. There are moments in life where you walk through a door expecting just another routine meeting, but by the time you walk out, the entire trajectory of your life has shifted. It was a sweltering summer morning in New York City. It was barely 9 a.m., but the heat radiating from the asphalt outside the Horizon Enterprises glass skyscraper was already making the air shimmer. I stepped out of my town car, a black leather briefcase in hand, and looked up at the 40-story building. 3 years ago, I had stood in this exact spot. The only difference was that back then, a man was holding my hand tightly, looking into my eyes and saying, "Trust me, Nat. I'm going to give you the best life imaginable." That man was my husband, Hunter. 3 years. It's not a lifetime, but it's enough time to turn a man with empty pockets into someone standing at the pinnacle of corporate success. It's also enough time to turn a promise into a complete joke. I walked into the expansive marble lobby. As soon as the young receptionist saw me, she bolted upright. "Good morning, Mrs." She stopped abruptly, her eyes darting around in panic. I knew exactly what she was about to call me. For 3 years, I had never made a public appearance at the company under my real title. Everyone just heard rumors that Horizon had a mysterious female majority shareholder, but very few had actually met her. I gave her a gentle smile. "It's fine. Carry on." She nodded frantically. As I walked past the reception desk, I heard whispers behind me. "Is that her?" "Who?" "The one people whisper about." The voices faded. I didn't look back. When the elevator doors opened on the 36th floor, I immediately sensed something was off. The executive floor was far more crowded than usual. People were rushing back and forth. A few administrative staff were even carrying floral arrangements. I furrowed my brow. Just then, a young woman in a striking red dress, hugging a stack of folders, walked past and bumped hard into my shoulder. "Watch where you're going," she snapped. She looked up and down at me, her eyes filled with an obnoxious, judgmental glare. I looked back at her. She was undeniably pretty delicate features, flawless makeup. Her tight red dress plunged into a deep V-neck, and the designer handbag on her arm was a limited edition that had just dropped last month. But what caught my eye were the diamond stud earrings she was wearing. They cost roughly $8,000. I knew that exact figure because the corporate credit card receipt for them was in the financial audit I had reviewed just last week. At the time, I assumed Hunter had bought them as a corporate gift for a client. Seeing them on this woman's ears, everything clicked into place. She stared at me for a few more seconds. "Which department are you from?" "I'm here for a meeting," I replied calmly. She let out a condescending laugh. "A meeting?" She looked at me like I had just told a hilarious joke. "Today is the executive board meeting. Regular employees aren't allowed anywhere near here." I looked at her. "Is that so? Good to know." She flipped her hair. "And honestly, you look completely unfamiliar." "I know. Practically everyone who matters in this building, and I've never seen you." Before I could respond, someone called out from down the hall. "Mia!" A group of admins rushed over. "Mia, the boardroom is all set up." "Perfect," she smiled brightly, then turned back to me. "Anyway, I'm extremely busy." She took 2 steps, then paused and glanced back over her shoulder. "Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm the special assistant to the CEO." She smiled triumphantly and walked away. I stood there for a moment. Special assistant to the CEO. I knew for a fact that position didn't exist in the company's organizational chart. When I audited the HR structure 2 months ago, there was no such title. I made my way toward the boardroom. As I pushed the heavy oak doors open, nearly 20 people turned to look at me. The room fell dead silent for a few seconds. I saw a couple of the older executives turn pale. They recognized me. The rest did not. Before I could even take a seat, Mia's voice rang out from behind me. "Who let you in here?" I turned around. Mia marched in, dropping all pretenses of politeness. She crossed her arms, glaring at me like I was a rogue intern. "Do you not speak English? This is a high-level executive meeting. I pulled out a leather chair and sat down. I know. You know, and yet you still barge in? She let out a cold laugh. Where is security? No one moved a muscle. The atmosphere in the room was growing suffocatingly tense. I looked around. The senior vice presidents were actively avoiding my gaze, looking like they were trying to swallow rocks. Mia frowned. Did you not hear me? She marched right up to where I was sitting and slammed her folders onto the mahogany table. Fine, let me spell it out for you. I am the fiancé of the CEO, Hunter. Soon I will be the lady of this house. Today, I am chairing this meeting on his behalf. As for you, she looked down her nose at me. You're fired. Pack your desk. The entire boardroom was paralyzed. I heard someone's coffee mug clatter against a saucer. As for me, I just looked up at her and offered a soft, quiet smile. Because right at that exact second, the boardroom doors opened again, and Hunter walked in. The absolute moment his eyes landed on me sitting in that chair, the blood drained entirely from his face, leaving him ashen. I hadn't spoken a single word, but I could clearly see it. The man who once vowed to protect me, for the rest of his life was standing there, and his knees were visibly shaking. The next day, when I stepped into my own private office at Horizon Enterprises, the air was still thick with the aftermath of yesterday's meeting. The moment I had introduced myself to the room, silence had swallowed them whole. Hunter, the man I once called my husband, had stood before me, looking like a deer caught in headlights, utterly speechless. I stood in the doorway of my office, my briefcase in hand, observing the floor. The employees were actively avoiding eye contact. Some looked resentful, others burning with curiosity. I knew exactly what they were wondering. What on earth just happened? Today, my job wasn't just to assume operational control. It was to gut the rot from the inside out. I was here to uncover all the secrets Hunter thought he could keep buried forever. I sat at my desk, took a deep breath, and began sorting through the documents my legal team had prepared overnight. I organized them by priority, starting with the murky expenditures, the shell company investments, and the long list of people Hunter had been secretly bankrolling with the company's money. Money I thought I wasn't tracking. I knew every digit by heart. 3 years. A total of nearly $10 million had been siphoned out of Horizon and funneled into 4 offshore private accounts. Included in those expenses were allowances for mistresses whose names I didn't even want to learn. My hands trembled slightly, but my mind was ice cold. I realized that true power was now resting firmly in my hands. Hunter walked into my office. His face was still as pale as yesterday, but this time, he tried to force a strained smile. A tactic we both knew was utterly useless. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him, my gaze cutting straight through his facade like a scalpel. He fell silent. He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes stripped of the arrogant confidence of a CEO, leaving behind nothing but panic and dread. I picked up the corporate equity certificate, the one clearly stating I owned 51% of the shares and held absolute veto power, and held it up. Hunter, do you really think you have any leverage left? I could hear his heavy, erratic breathing. He let out a long sigh and took a step forward, desperately trying to explain, but the words choked in his throat. I no longer had any desire to hear his excuses. 3 years ago, I put all my faith in him, believing he was a man who truly loved me. But 3 years was enough to show me that his love was nothing more than a transaction bought with money, power, and status. As for me, I was still the same woman. A woman who built her life on hard work and independence, refusing to rely on anyone. Not even the man who called me his wife. I buzzed my assistant and asked her to bring in the equity transfer documents and the itemized bank statements from the last 36 months. The office outside was dead silent. No one dared to speak a word. They just watched me work. I realized then that power isn't something you have to scream to enforce. It's something people recognize the moment they look at you, instinctively. Knowing they cannot fight it, Hunter stood there, his eyes wide, his forehead creased with anxiety. The realization was hitting him. Every shadow he had operated in, every hidden transaction, every secret he thought was perfectly concealed, I had it all. Organized, logically laid out, and ready to be weaponized. I started going through the accounts line by line. When I read out the monthly allowances he was paying to his former lovers, women he thought, I had no clue about. I wasn't even angry. I just felt the cold, undeniable clarity of justice and personal power. A power a woman can wield without needing a man to back her up. I called Hunter closer and tossed the bank statements and receipts onto the desk. Here, explain this to me. Where did this money go? Who received it? And why on earth did you think I wouldn't find out? Hunter fumbled, his hands shaking as he tried to grasp the papers. He tried to piece together a coherent sentence, but there was no lie left that could convince me. He stood there, tears welling up in his eyes, looking exactly like a child caught stealing from a cookie jar. I felt a strange mix of pain and profound relief wash over me. He had lived in a delusion of grandeur for 3 years, and only now was he realizing that true power doesn't lie in money or sweet words. It lies in conviction, knowledge, and the courage to face the brutal truth. I instructed the HR and legal departments to immediately audit every expense, every transaction, and every contract Hunter had signed, emphasizing that the final report would be made public to the board of directors. Hunter hovered near the desk, hesitating. He didn't know what to say or how to fight back. All he could do was stand in silence, and I saw raw, unfiltered fear in his eyes. He used to think he was the king of this castle, but right now, he was just a man, standing before his wife, stripped of every ounce of authority. And I knew this was the exact moment he would finally have to pay the toll for what he had done. I received emails and messages from the vendors and individuals tied to the Prusaneso, illicit funds, demanding to speak with me and offering to provide evidence to save themselves. I read every message, every email, every confession. The past leaves footprints. Every move Hunter made left a paper trail, and I was going to use those very documents to burn his house of cards to the ground. I felt a sense of peace, knowing that justice was finally coming. Hunter took a hesitant step forward and whispered, "Nat, please, just give me one more chance. I'll fix this." I looked at him, my expression completely blank, and said, "No need. You've lived in a fantasy for 3 years. Now it's time to face reality." He dropped his head in defeat. For the first time in our marriage, I saw Hunter truly terrified. Not of me or the company, but of himself, of the catastrophic choices that had backed him into a corner with 0 exits. I spent the entire morning auditing files, coordinating with my legal team, calling the banks, and systematically cleaning up the mess Hunter had left behind. Every move I made was calculated and precise. I wasn't rushing, I wasn't throwing a tantrum, but my cold efficiency was enough to make everyone in the Grachin building feel the gravity of the power I was exercising. Hunter stood quietly in the corner, not daring to argue. As the workday drew to a close, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the bustling Manhattan skyline. The late afternoon sun reflected off the glass towers. I reminded myself that real power isn't about intimidating others. It's about knowing how to protect yourself and what you've rightfully earned. Hunter was standing a few feet behind me, too afraid to close the distance. I knew that from this day forward, every breath he took in this company would be under my rules. There was no going back to his old tricks. I turned around, leaning against the glass, and said softly but firmly, "You have 3 days to wrap up your affairs and hand over everything. If you don't, my lawyers will proceed with criminal charges." Hunter nodded weakly, his eyes brimming with tears, unable to formulate a response. He was entirely at my mercy, with no options left but absolute compliance. The executive suite was eerily quiet, save for the sound of rustling paper, ringing phones, and the nervous heartbeats of the staff watching from the glass partitions. I smiled to myself. Everything was on track, and the truth was, finally stepping out of the dark. I still remember the midday lull that followed, after Hunter hung his head and walked out of my office, looking like a man whose soul had been extracted. The massive 36th floor became unnervingly quiet. It wasn't the silence of an empty office. It was the silence of hundreds of people trying to breathe softly and walk on their tiptoes. Everyone knew the real hurricane was just gathering strength off the coast. Some things seem insignificant when hidden in the shadows, but once dragged into the light, they grow monstrously fast, leaving you no time to react. I sat at my mahogany desk, staring at the skyscrapers outside, no longer thinking about Hunter's infidelity. It was strange. If this had happened a month ago, my heart would have ached so much I wouldn't have been able to sleep. But that day, I wasn't thinking about love or marriage. I was thinking about my responsibility to the 3,000 employees working under the Horizon Enterprises umbrella. This company wasn't built by Hunter alone. 3 years ago, when we got married, I injected $6 million of my own venture capital into Horizon, bringing in my family's entire network of East Coast partners and paving the way for dozens of massive contracts. While Hunter was sleeping comfortably in a multi-million-dollar penthouse, I was sitting in JFK Terminal at 2 a.m. waiting for red-eye flights to Chicago, just to secure a deal. And yet, in the end, I let out a dry chuckle. Men are fascinating creatures. When they have nothing, they are terrified of losing the woman standing by their frontier. Two-side. But the moment they have everything, they convince themselves they built the empire with their own two bare hands. My desk phone rang. My assistant's voice was hushed. Miss Natalie, the finance department just sent up the hard copies. Should I bring them in? Bring them. Minutes later, a massive stack of ledgers was placed on my desk. I opened them, one by one. At first, it was just unusual expenses of a few tens of thousands of dollars. Then it escalated to hundreds of thousands. Then 1 million, 3 million. The further I read, the colder my eyes grew. There was a $500,000 charge categorized as an investment in a luxury resort project in Miami. But according to the progress reports, the project was nothing but a shell LLC. Another charge for $350,000 was listed as client entertainment. What kind of client entertainment costs $350,000? You could rent out a Michelin star restaurant for a week and not hit that number. As I was reviewing the files, my office door was shoved open. Hunter walked in. This time, he didn't knock, and he had completely lost his untouchable CEO aura. His tailored suit jacket was wrinkled and unbuttoned. His tie was loosened, and his eyes were bloodshot. He probably hadn't slept since the meeting. He stood in front of my desk and stared at me for a long time. Nat. I didn't look up. What is it? Do you really have to push it this far? I turned the page of the ledger. How far? You know damn well that if this goes public, I'll lose absolutely everything. I stopped flipping the pages and finally looked up at him. Lose everything? Hunter, are you seriously giving me a lecture about losing things? I dropped the folder onto the desk. When you took company funds to buy a luxury condo for Mia, did you think about losing everything? When you wired money offshore, did you think about losing everything? When you had your hands all over her in this very building and let her parade around calling herself your fiancé, did you think about losing everything? Hunter's face went completely white. He opened his mouth a few times but couldn't produce a sound. Because some things simply cannot be justified. You can make excuses for mistakes, but you cannot justify calculated betrayal. He slumped into the chair opposite my desk, his hands clasped tightly together. After a long silence, he muttered, Nat, I know I messed up. I really do, Mia. Was just a distraction. I never, ever planned on divorcing you. I looked at him and burst out laughing. It was the first genuine laugh I had let out all day, but it only seemed to terrify him more. Hunter, do you know what the saddest part of all this is? I asked. He stared at me. The saddest part isn't that you slept with someone else. It's that, even now, you honestly believe I'm heartbroken over your infidelity. I stood up slowly and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. I'm heartbroken because the man I loved turned out to be a parasite. A man who steals from his own employees to feed his greed. A man who would betray the very woman who pulled him out of the gutter. A man who, even when caught red-handed, is still trying to spin a web of lies. There was a long silence behind me. Then, I heard the sound of a chair scraping aggressively against the floor. A second later, a heavy thud. I turned around. Hunter was on his knees. This time, it wasn't in the boardroom. There was no audience, no employees, no board of directors, just the two of us. He knelt on the expensive rug, his eyes red and brimming with tears. Nat, please, I'm begging you. Just give me one more chance. Just one. I'll fix everything. I'll fire Mia today. I'll liquidate my assets and pay back every cent. I looked at the man groveling on the floor, and my mind suddenly flashed back to our wedding day. That day, Hunter stood in front of my father, his hands shaking, and promised, I will take care of Natalie for the rest of my life. Sir. My father had looked at him and said only one thing. I don't care if you're poor, son. I only care if you change who you are. At the time, I was mad at my dad. I thought he was being too harsh, too elitist. But now I understood. A man who has seen the world rarely gets it wrong. I looked down at Hunter. Get up. I despise watching people beg. Hunter looked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Nat? I took a step back. Don't misunderstand me. I'm telling you to get up, not because I forgive you, but because I don't want to waste my time looking down at someone who is no longer worth my respect. Suddenly, there was a frantic knocking at the door. My assistant burst in. Her? Faspal. Miss Natalie, we have a major situation. I turned to her. What is it? She swallowed hard. There's someone causing a massive scene in the main lobby. Who? It's Hunter's mother. I froze. Hunter's face instantly went from pale to a sickly gray, because two of us knew perfectly well that if Eleanor was here, things were about to get infinitely more complicated. I watched Hunter stand paralyzed in the middle of my office. His expression shifted into the exact look a man gets when he realizes his worst nightmare is physically standing in the lobby and there is no fire escape. I stood still for a few seconds, a flood of old memories rushing into my mind. If there was one person on this earth who genuinely believed Hunter was the most brilliant, flawless man to ever grace the planet, it was his mother, Eleanor. On the day we got married, Eleanor had held my hands in front of all our Winnesimen relatives and said, My boy had a very rough childhood, Natalie. If he ever makes a mistake, you just need to yield to him a little. It's so hard for men in the corporate world, the pressure is immense. I just smiled back then. I thought it was typical motherly love. But I later learned that some kinds of love are like watering a plant, while others are like pouring gasoline on a fire. My assistant's voice broke the silence. Miss Natalie. She's screaming at the one. Security guards. She says if anyone touches her, she'll sue the company and tear the lobby apart. I took a quiet breath. Hunter snapped out of his trance and lunged forward. Nat, don't go down there. Let me handle her. I looked at him. Handle her? You think you can handle this? Hunter clamped his mouth shut. I didn't say another word. I grabbed my phone and walked out. The elevator ride from the 36th floor to the lobby took nearly a minute. During that time, the silence was so heavy I could hear Hunter's ragged breathing behind me. He kept checking his phone, probably trying to call her, but she wasn't picking up. When the elevator chimed and the doors slid open, the sprawling lobby was packed. Employees were huddled in small groups, security guards formed a barricade, and in the center of it all was a woman in her late 50s, pointing, her finger and screaming at the top of her lungs. Eleanor. As soon as she saw me step out, her eyes bulged with rage. You have the nerve to show your face down here? The entire lobby went dead silent. I stood about 10 feet away from her, saying nothing. Eleanor tried to charge at me, but the guards quickly blocked her path. Ma'am, please calm down, a guard warned. Calm down? What is there to calm down about? She shrieked. My son married a vicious, venomous woman like her. And you want me to calm down? She's trying to steal my son's company. She's trying to force him into a divorce. She's trying to destroy our family. Whispers started rippling through the crowd. Some employees looked down. Others shot me covert glances. I just stood perfectly still. Because sometimes, defending yourself to a madman is the most pointless thing you can do. Seeing my lack of reaction only fueled Eleanor's fury. She pointed a trembling finger right at my face. From the day you walked into our family, I knew you. We're no good. Always working, always in meetings, always on business trips. Have you ever spent a single day acting like a proper wife? If Hunter found someone, else it's your own damn fault. If a woman can't keep her husband's attention, who else is there to blame? Behind me, Hunter looked like he was going to be sick. Mom, please stop talking. Eleanor whipped her head around to face him. Am I wrong? I know exactly what kind of man my son is. If you hadn't backed him into a corner, he wouldn't have done any of this. I looked at her, and my mind flashed back to our first year of marriage. Hunter had caught a severe strain of pneumonia and was hospitalized. I canceled a massive convention in Chicago and stayed awake for 3 straight days by his bedside. Eleanor had held my hand, crying, telling me, "Our family is so blessed to have a daughter-in-law like you. Human nature is incredibly bizarre. When they need you, you're an angel. When you stop playing by their rules, you become the devil." I took a step forward. My voice was very soft. "Are you finished, Eleanor?" She paused, clearly expecting me to scream back. I didn't. I looked her dead in the eye and spoke slowly. "You say I haven't acted like a proper wife. Fine. Over the last 3 years, who paid off the mortgage on your house in Ohio? Who paid the medical bills when your husband had his bypass surgery? Who sends you a $5,000 allowance every single month? Who is currently paying the out-of-state tuition for Hunter's nephew? Add it all up. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Whose money do you think that was?" Eleanor stiffened. I took another step. "You say I'm destroying the family. Let me ask you. 3 years ago, when this company was millions of dollars in debt and facing bankruptcy, who brought in the venture capital to save it? Who brought in the bankruptcy? Fortune 500 clients? Who stayed up until 3 a.m. negotiating contracts so your son could play the big shot CEO? Who?" My voice wasn't loud, but it echoed in the silent lobby. Eleanor's mouth fell, open, but no words came out, because she knew every word was the indisputable truth. I turned to Hunter. "Tell her, did I lie about a single thing?" Hunter hung his head, his fists clenched at his sides. After an eternity, he whispered, "Mom, Nat is right. The company only exists today because of her." Eleanor's eyes widened in horror. "What? What did you just say? Has she brainwashed you? I am your mother." Hunter squeezed his eyes shut, his shoulders shaking. Perhaps for the first time in his life, he had to choose between facing the objective truth and hiding behind his mother's skirt. He opened his eyes. "Mom, I messed up. I did this to Nat. It's not her fault. It's all on me." The lobby felt like a graveyard. Eleanor stared at her son, her expression morphing from righteous fury to sheer bewilderment. Then, a few seconds later, she stumbled backward. "What are you saying? Did you actually cheat on your wife?" Hunter kept his head down and didn't say a word, but his silence was the loudest. Confession possible. I watched the color drain from Eleanor's face, then flush. Bright red, then go pale again. She stood frozen for nearly half a minute. Then, suddenly, she lunged forward. Smack! The sharp sound of a slap echoed across the marble floor. The entire lobby jumped. Hunter stood perfectly still, his head turned to the side, a bright red handprint materializing on his cheek. Eleanor was trembling uncontrollably. I thought everyone else was lying. I thought she was the villain. But it was you. With that, her legs gave out and she collapsed onto the floor, bursting into loud, ugly sobs. The sound of a devastated, older woman crying in the middle of a corporate lobby was both pathetic and profoundly tragic. I stood there, my heart suddenly feeling incredibly heavy, because sometimes the people who commit the crimes aren't the ones who suffer the most pain. Just then, my phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text message from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a single cryptic sentence. "If you want to know where Hunter's real hidden money is, come to the Roost Cafe. Tonight at 8 p.m. Come alone." I stared at the screen. Below the text was an attached photo. When the image loaded, my blood ran ice cold. It was a picture of Hunter, and sitting right next to him was a little boy, maybe 5 years old. There are certain things in life that, if someone just told you about them, you'd assume they were plot twists in a cheap soap opera. A normal person finds it hard to fathom that someone could betray their spouse so profoundly, on so many levels, and still come home to eat dinner, sleep in the same bed, and I say I love you the next morning, as if absolutely nothing was wrong. But the moment I saw that photo on my phone, I realized that the boundaries of human greed and deception stretch much, much further than my imagination. I stood frozen in the lobby, the phone still glowing in my hand. In the photo, Hunter was crouching in front of a little boy, holding an ice cream cone. He was smiling so naturally, so brightly. It was a genuine smile that I hadn't seen on Bersection his face for almost a year. Whenever he was with me, he was always too busy, under too much pressure, or exhausted. I stared at it for a long time. I wasn't feeling pain. My brain was just rapidly trying to snap these disjointed puzzle pieces together. After a minute, I slipped the phone into my pocket. Eleanor was still sitting on the floor, weeping. Hunter was standing next to her, looking like a hollow shell. I didn't say a word. I turned on my heel and walked straight out the revolving doors. Behind me, I heard Hunter shout, "Nat! Nat!" I didn't look back. When you suspect a lie, you ask questions to find the truth. But when a dark premonition has already cemented itself in your gut, you become terrified of hearing the answer. Throughout the entire cab ride to my lawyer's office, I didn't say a word. The car navigated through the gridlocked Manhattan traffic. The harsh afternoon sun reflected off the skyscrapers, blindingly bright. I sat in the back seat, staring out the window, my mind completely blank. I thought back to about a year ago. That was when Hunter first started acting differently. He came home late constantly. His phone was always placed face down. There were nights he'd get a call at 2 a.m. and go out to the Tuzenain and 20 Main balcony to talk for an hour. I remember asking him, "Is the company taking on that much water?" Hunter had hugged me and smiled. "I'm just trying to build our war chest, Nat. So when we have kids, we'll never have to worry about a damn thing." I believed him. Completely. Because I never imagined the man sharing my bed could look me in the eyes and lie with such calm, chilling precision. The cab pulled up to the sleek high-rise where my legal team was based. When I walked into the suite, Kyle was already waiting for me. Kyle was an old friend from my university days at Columbia, and he served as my personal counsel for all Horizon-related matters. He was meticulous, spoke very little, but was incredibly lethal in a courtroom. Ever since I started investigating Hunter, he was the one handling the paper trail. As soon as he saw my face, Kyle knew something was terribly wrong. He pulled out a chair for me. "What happened?" I didn't say anything. I just unlocked my phone and slid it across the table. Kyle looked at the photo for a few seconds, his brow furrowing. "Where did you get this?" Anonymous text. Kyle fell silent. He opened his laptop and airdropped the photo to his screen. I watched him work. A few minutes later, he zoomed in on the high-res image. His eyes suddenly locked onto a detail. "Hold on, look at this." I leaned in. Kyle pointed to the bottom corner of the image, right at the little boy's chest. At first glance, I hadn't noticed it, but zoomed in, it was unmistakable. The boy was wearing a small silver chain with a custom-engraved coin pendant. My breath hitched. I knew that pendant. For Hunter's birthday last year, I had commissioned a jeweler to make 2 identical white gold pendants engraved with our initials. One for him, one for me. Hunter told me he loved it, wore it for about a week, and then claimed he lost it at the gym. I had been upset about it for days. Now, staring at the screen, my heart began hammering against my ribs. Kyle looked at me. "Nat, are you okay?" I took a deep, shuddering breath. "I'm fine. I'm going to meet the sender. Tonight." "Absolutely not." Kyle instantly objected. "What if it's a trap? It's too dangerous to go alone." I shook my head. "They reached out to me. That means they want something. And people who want to make a deal usually don't want you dead." Kyle stared at me for a long time before letting out a defeated sigh. "Fine, but I'm going with you. I'll sit a few tables away." I managed a weak smile. "Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate that?" At exactly 8 p.m., I walked into the Roost Cafe. It was nestled on a quiet, tree-lined street in Greenwich Village. The cafe was mostly empty. Soft jazz was playing, and the ambient lighting was a warm, dim amber. I scanned the room, my eyes stopping at a booth in the far back corner. A woman was sitting there, her back to the door. She had long dark hair and was wearing a simple white blouse. She looked to be in her early 30s. As I approached, she stood up slowly. "You must be Natalie." I sat down in the booth opposite her. "I am. And who are you?" The woman was quiet for a moment, then gave a sad, exhausted smile. "My name is Tara. I was with Hunter for 3 years." My hands clenched under the table. She looked me dead in the eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "And the boy in the photo is my son." In that exact moment, I heard someone drop a spoon on the tile floor across the cafe. but I couldn't hear my own heartbeat anymore because I knew the game had just violently changed its rules. When I walked out of the Roost Cafe into the cool New York night air, my chest, I felt so tight I could barely draw a breath. But I didn't stop moving. I walked straight back to Kyle's law firm. That was where all the evidence of Hunter's deceit, the hidden offshore accounts, and the secrets he thought he had buried were meticulously compiled. When I walked into the conference room, Kyle had already spread the financial dossiers across the massive oak table. His expression was grim but resolute, silently radiating the strength and calm I desperately needed to borrow. I knew, right then, that there was absolutely no avenue left for Hunter to deny or evade. The numbers were black and white. The paper trail was flawless. I was going to use it to force him to face the total destruction he had authored. Kyle pushed his gold-rimmed glasses up the bridge of his nose and looked at me. His voice was steady but sharp as a razor. Nat, I've finished aggregating every wire transfer and corporate expense Hunter authorized over the last 36 months. I'm going to walk you through this line by line, so you understand the sheer scale of the fraud. I nodded, took a seat, and stared intensely at the documents Kyle slid in front of me. I was terrified, yet fiercely determined. From this moment on, every step I took had to be calculated. If I showed a single ounce of weakness, I would lose the empire I had built with my own blood and sweat. Kyle clicked a remote, and a projector illuminated a massive flowchart on the BSIS wall, detailing a web of names, shell LLCs, and offshore bank accounts. Over 3 years, Hunter embezzled roughly $10 million, Kyle explained. Of that, $6 million was funneled into private accounts in the Cayman Islands under his name. About $2.5 million went to various mistresses and consultants. The rest was bled into phantom projects to wash the money clean. I felt a surge of pure rage, but it was quickly eclipsed by a sense of absolute power. I had him. I had the smoking gun, and there was nowhere he could run. Walk me through the specifics, I ordered, my voice like ice. First, Kyle pointed a laser pointer at the screen. The Miami Luxury Resort project. He diverted $1 million in seed capital. The project doesn't exist. It's a mailbox in Delaware. Second, corporate entertainment expenses totaling over $1.5 million with zero corresponding client contracts or receipts. Third, payroll for special advisors, which was actually hush money and living expenses for his mistresses. That totals around $2.5 million. I took a slow breath, looked at Kyle, and said, "Prepare the indictments and civil asset forfeiture paperwork. I want everything bound and ready. When I present this to Hunter and the board, I want it to be a flawless execution. No loopholes. No escape routes." Kyle nodded. "It's all here. Bank statements, signed wire authorizations, email, transcripts, and the HR payroll records for his ghost employees." I opened the binders, reviewing the documents one by one. I felt like I was systematically tearing down a brick wall of lies Hunter had spent years building, leaving behind a gaping void that only the brutal truth could fill. "Are you absolutely certain we aren't missing anything, Kyle?" "I'm certain," he replied. "It's bulletproof." I stood up and walked toward the conference room door. My steps felt heavy, but my resolve was absolute. The next time I saw Hunter would determine the endgame. I was not going to let him gaslight his way out of this. I took a town car back to the Upper East Side penthouse Hunter and I shared. He called it our forever home. Tonight, it was just a crime scene. When I pushed the front door open, Hunter was standing in the foyer. He looked ghastly. His shirt was untucked, his hair disheveled, and he looked at me like a man bracing for an execution. I walked right past him into the living room and threw my bag onto the sofa. I didn't say hello. Some moments don't require pleasantries. I pulled the thick legal binders out of my bag and dropped them onto the glass coffee table with a heavy thud. "Hunter, I know everything. Every wire transfer, every shell company, every woman you paid off with my money. I have the paper trail for all of it." Hunter choked, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch the binders. Though he didn't dare open them, his lips moved, but no sound came out. I stared him down, enunciating every word. "You are going to take responsibility for every single thing you've done. I am not protecting you anymore. The board will know. The authorities will know. Hunter collapsed onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. A wretched sob tore from his throat. For the first time, I saw genuine remorse, not because he had hurt me, but because the money and power he worshipped were instantly no stume, evaporating. I stood over him, holding the reins of my life again. It felt suffocating, yet incredibly liberating. I knew that from tomorrow on, the corporate world wouldn't just see me as a silent partner. They would look at me with a mix of deep respect and absolute terror. Because a woman armed with the truth and the receipts will annihilate anyone in her path. We are going to sit here tonight, I commanded. You are going to walk me through every stolen dime. If you cooperate, I might let you walk away with the clothes on your back. If you fight me, I will let the SEC and the FBI tear you to shreds. Hunter looked up, his eyes bloodshot, and hunched over in submission. Nat, I'll do whatever you want. Please, just don't send me to prison. I gave a curt nod. I didn't offer comfort. His words were just the background noise of my victory. He was entirely at my mercy, trapped in the prison of his own making. The penthouse was dead silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tonight was the night the empire of lies fell, and Hunter finally understood that I was the one holding the crown. Later that night, I left Hunter sitting in the living room and slowly walked upstairs. When you finally see the bottom of the abyss, you lose the desire to scream and fight. The feeling is strange, like a crystal glass that has shattered on the floor. People only see the mess when it breaks, but the glass itself knows it had microfractures long before it ever hit the ground. I stood in front of the master bedroom door, my hand on the handle, but I didn't turn it. This room was supposed to be my sanctuary. This was where Hunter used to hold me and talk about having 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and buying a summer house in Aspen to grow old in. Now, those memories felt like words written in the sand at low tide. I pushed the door open. Everything was perfectly in its place. Our large wedding portrait was still hanging above the bed, the 2 of us smiling radiantly. I walked over, stared at it for a moment, and then reached up and took it down. I didn't smash it. I didn't scream. I just gently took it off the wall, like removing a piece of staging from a canceled play. I heard footsteps behind me. Hunter was standing in the doorway. He looked at the frame in my hands, panic flashing across his face. Nat, what are you doing? I didn't turn around. Packing. Getting rid of things I no longer need. His voice began to shake. Please don't do this. Let's just talk. I know I was wrong. God, I know I was so wrong. I set the frame face down on the dresser and finally looked at him. Hunter, do. You know what the strangest thing about all this is? He stared at me, terrified. When a woman is still in love, she asks a million questions. Where were you? What are you doing? Why are you late? Why are you being so distant? But when she stops asking questions, that's when she's already gone. Hunter stood perfectly still, the color draining from his face. I opened his closet, filled with his designer suits. I reached in and pulled out a light blue dress shirt. I had bought it for him for his birthday last year. I suddenly remembered something. Last November, he went on a 3-day business trip to Chicago. When he came back, he was wearing this exact shirt. While I was putting his laundry away, I smelled women's perfume on the collar. I had asked him, did the dry cleaners change their detergent? He had laughed, kissed my forehead, and said, I was sitting next to a woman, drenched in Chanel on the flight back. Must have rubbed off. I believed him. I looked down at the shirt and let out a dry, self-deprecating laugh. It's true when you're in love. You gaslight yourself far better than anyone else ever could. Hunter panicked seeing me laugh. He rushed forward and grabbed my wrist. Nat, please stop smiling like that. It's scaring me. I looked down at his hand, then slowly peeled his fingers off my wrist. It scares you? Were you scared when you were lying to my face? Were you scared when you were wiring my company's money to your mistresses? Were you scared when you let some assistant call me a nobody in my own boardroom? Hunter hung his head. He had no answers. The silence was deafening. Just then, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Kyle. I answered it. What is it, Kyle? His voice was grave. Nat, I ran a background check on Tara. There's a massive Discrepancy. I frowned. What do you mean? Is the kid not real? The boy is real, but Tara lied to you about something else. I stood up straighter. What? Kyle paused. The boy isn't Hunter's biological son. I froze. What? I pulled Hunter's medical records from 2 years ago. He had a private consultation at a specialist clinic in Manhattan. The test results were conclusive, Nat. Hunter is completely sterile. He has a 0% chance of fathering a child naturally. My hand gripped the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. My entire body went rigid. He obviously never told you, Kyle continued softly, and I think this rabbit hole goes way deeper than you realize. I stood completely paralyzed. If the boy wasn't Hunter's, why had he been providing for him? Why the secret visits? Why the offshore money? But what made my blood run cold wasn't the financial fraud. It was a memory that suddenly violently crashed into my mind. 2 years ago, Hunter had sat me down, looking incredibly serious, and said, Nat, maybe we should go to a fertility clinic. I think your stressful work schedule might be making it hard for us to conceive. I had gone. I went through grueling hormone panels. I blamed myself for months. I took expensive supplements. I sat in the cold, sterile bathroom of the clinic and cried my eyes out because I thought my body was failing us. And Hunter? He had sat next to me on the bathroom floor, hugging me, whispering, It's okay, baby. I don't need kids. I just need you. My hands began to shake violently. I slowly turned my head to look at Hunter. He saw my face and instinctively took a step back. Not? I stared at him, my voice barely a whisper, but so devoid of warmth I didn't even recognize it myself. Hunter, 2 years ago, the one who was infertile. Was you, wasn't it? In that exact fraction of a second, Hunter looked like he had been shot in the chest. Sometimes, when you hear a devastating truth, you don't explode into rage. You don't break down sobbing like in the movies. When pain breaches the threshold of human endurance, the first emotion isn't agony, it's an absolute freezing, emptiness, like being thrown into a frozen lake in the dead of winter. It's so cold it burns until you can't feel anything at all. I stood in my own bedroom, looking at the man I had built a life with. His face went from pale to green to sheer, unadulterated panic. My brain was stuck on a loop. If he knew he was the problem, why did he let me suffer through 2 years of agonizing guilt? Hunter swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing, but he couldn't speak. His fists were clenched so tight his knuckles were bone white. I knew that look. It was the look of a rat trapped in a corner, desperately looking for a crack in the wall. I took a slow step toward him. Every step felt like I was trampling on the baller, corpse of our marriage. Tell me, I whispered. 2 years ago, the test results were yours, weren't they? Hunter stared at the floor. He didn't answer. I let out a short, sharp laugh. Are you really going to keep lying to me? Do. You want me to have Kyle email the medical records right now? Hearing that, Hunter's legs gave out. He stumbled backward and collapsed onto the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. He looked nothing like the slick, commanding CEO of Horizon. After a long time, his voice cracked. It was me. I didn't speak. The day I got the results, I sat in my car in the parking garage for 3 hours. I couldn't come home. I was terrified. I was so scared you'd leave me. I was terrified you'd look at me with pity. I remained silent. I was remembering everything. The injections, the doctor, visits, the tears. The times I told him, if you want to leave me to have a trace family, I won't stop you. He had cried that day. I thought he was crying out of love. Now I knew he was crying out of sheer guilt. So you blamed it on me, I said evenly. You let me believe I was broken. You watched me torture myself for 2 years, and you didn't say a goddamn word. Hunter hunched over further, his shoulders shaking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just couldn't bear to lose you. I burst out laughing. I laughed so hard my eyes watered. You didn't want to lose me? So you gaslit me about my own body? You slept with other women? You stole from my company? You paraded your mistress around my office? You did all of that because you didn't want to lose me? Hunter couldn't speak. He just sat there, looking like a pathetic, broken child. But some sins can't be washed away with tears. Right at that moment, Hunter's cell phone rang on the nightstand. He jumped, looking at the caller ID. The color vanished from his face, completely. It was Mia. He lunged for the phone and desperately hit decline. But 3 seconds later, it rang again, and again, and again. I looked at him. Answer it. No. Why not? Nat, please, it's not what you think. Let me explain. I pulled up a chair and sat down. I'll give you 3 seconds. Either you answer it, or I do. He froze. 1, 2, 3. I reached over, grabbed his phone, answered the call, and put it on speaker. Mia's shrill voice echoed through the room. Hunter, where the hell are you? I have an emergency. I went to the doctor today. I'm pregnant. I sat perfectly still. If this had been yesterday, it would have destroyed me. But today, it was the funniest thing I had ever heard. The man who just confessed to being completely sterile was now dealing with a mistress, claiming she was carrying his child. But what gave me chills was Hunter's reaction. He looked like he was about to vomit, because he knew, better than anyone on earth, that the baby could not possibly be his. When one secret is exposed, the rest float to the surface like dead wood, after a splendid flood. Sitting in that chair, listening to the phone call, I finally felt like I fucked Dodie, had dragged myself out of a deep mud pit. I was exhausted, not from the climb, but from the realization of who I was tethered to. Hunter, why aren't you saying anything? Mia shrieked through the speaker. I'm terrified. The doctor says I'm 6 weeks along. Say something. The room was so quiet I could hear Hunter hyperventilating. I calmly ended the call and placed the phone back on the nightstand. Well, I smiled. Are you so happy you're speechless? Hunter violently shook his head. No. Nat, I swear to God, listen to me. He stopped mid-sentence. He knew he had no play left. He couldn't beg for forgiveness on the grounds of a minor mistake. A sterile man with a pregnant mistress. It was a comedy of errors. I leaned back in the chair. Hunter, why don't you tell me? Whose baby is she carrying? Hunter's eye twitched. I don't know. I laughed. You don't know? You know you're sterile. So you're telling me I don't know who the woman you bought a condo for is sleeping with? Hunter dropped his head between his knees, gripping his hair so hard his knuckles popped. Suddenly, he sprang up. I'm going to find her. I'm going to get the truth out of her. He grabbed his car keys and bolted for the door. I didn't try to stop him. People always claim they are running toward the truth, when in reality, they are just running away from the consequences. The front door slammed shut. I sat alone in the silence. A minute later, my phone rang again. It was Kyle. I'm here, I said. Kyle took a deep breath. Nat, my investigators just pulled another file. There's one more thing. I pinched the bridge of my nose. I didn't think anything could surprise me. Anymore. What is it? 2 years ago when you were in Tokyo for that month-long summit, Hunter wired $150,000 to a private fertility clinic. I paused. A clinic? Yeah. At first I thought it was just standard medical bills for his own condition. But my guy got a look at the ledger. It was for an IVF procedure. I stood up. What do you mean? Kyle was quiet for a second. Hunter paid for an embryo transfer, Nat. But the woman listed on the medical file wasn't you. I felt the blood rush from my head. I gripped the back of the chair. Who was it? Tara. The room spun. Tara. The woman who just sat across from me in the cafe and swore the boy wasn't Hunter's. The woman who conveniently appeared with an anonymous text. It didn't make sense. I remembered the look in her eyes at the cafe. It wasn't the look of a jealous lover. It was the look of sheer exhaustion. Kyle, I said urgently, keep digging. I need the whole truth. Right now. I'm on it. I hung up. 10 minutes later, the front door burst open. Hunter had returned, and he looked worse than before. He was sweating profusely, panting like he had sprinted miles. He stood in the bedroom doorway and delivered a sentence that made my heart and stop. Nat, Tara is gone. I shot up. What are you talking about? Her landlord said she moved out 3 days ago, left no forwarding address. Her phone is disconnected. I can't find her anywhere. A chill ran down my spine, because right at that exact moment my phone buzzed with another anonymous text. If you want the truth about Tara, go to Sinai Private Clinic right now. If you're late, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Room 308. They say life is like walking through a dense fog. While you're in it, you can't see a thing. But when you finally step out and look back, you realize the signs were there all along. I looked at the text, then at Hunter. We are going to Sinai Private Clinic. Hunter frowned. Why? I shoved my phone into his chest. He read the text, and his eyes widened in horror. Who sent this? I don't know, but I suggest you drive fast. The car ride to the clinic was suffocating. The Manhattan streets were practically empty, the yellow streetlights washing over the hood of the car. Hunter gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. He kept shooting me panicked glances, wanting to say something, but lacking the courage. 20 minutes later, we pulled up to Sinai Private Clinic. It was a discreet, high-end medical facility. I had actually donated to their pediatric wing a few years ago for a PR event. I never imagined I'd be returning to uncover the darkest secrets of my own marriage. As we walked into the lobby, my phone buzzed one last time. 3rd floor. The elevator ride felt like descending into purgatory. When the doors opened, the corridor was sterile, quiet, smelling of bleach and rubbing alcohol. We walked down the hall to room 308. The door was slightly ajar, warm light, spilling into the hallway. I pushed the door open, and I froze. Lying in the hospital bed was Tara. She was hooked up to an IV, looking frail and sickly pale. And sitting in a chair next to the bed, fast asleep with his head resting on the mattress, was the little boy, Timmy. Tara looked up and offered a weak, tired smile. You came. I stepped into the room. Hunter, standing right behind me, went rigid. Tara? Hunter gasped. What the hell are you doing here? Why did you disappear? Why is your phone off? Tara looked at him, her eyes eerily calm. Are you actually worried about me? Hunter? Hunter choked, unable to formulate a response. I pulled up a chair and sat down next to the bed. You texted me, I said. Tara nodded. I did. I need to tell you everything. The room was deathly quiet. You could hear the faint hum of the heart monitor. Tara reached out and gently stroked Timmy's hair. This is Timmy, my son. But he is not Hunter's son. I didn't speak. Hunter was speechless. Tara looked down. 3 years ago, I met Hunter at a hospital just like this. My mother was dying of cancer. I couldn't afford the treatments. He stepped in. He paid the bills. He visited her. He was our savior. Hunter stood frozen. Tara gave a hollow laugh. I thought he liked me, but I soon realized he was just grooming me for a job. I clenched my jaw. What job? Tara looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. 2 years ago, he told me he desperately needed a child, but he couldn't let his wife know he was sterile. He said if I agreed to be a surrogate using donor sperm, he would set up a trust, the fund that would take care of my mother's medical bills for the rest of her life. The room felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out. I slowly turned to look at Hunter. He looked like he had been bludgeoned. Tara, stop, Hunter pleaded, his voice breaking. Tara laughed, tears spilling down her cheeks. Why? Are you scared? Are you scared your wife is going to find out you plan to trap her in a fake marriage? With a donor baby for the rest of her life? I stared at Hunter. The absolute betrayal was staggering. But what chilled me too, the bone was what Tara said next. She looked at me, her voice dropping to a whisper. But Nat, I lied to you at the cafe. Hunter wasn't the mastermind behind the surrogacy plan. She slowly turned her head toward the door. A raspy, exhausted voice echoed from the hallway. It was me. I whipped around. Standing in the doorway was Eleanor, Hunter's mother. When a truth is still wrapped up, you fear it. But when it's finally ripped open, the fear vanishes, leaving only a profound, numb clarity. Like standing in a torrential downpour. Once you are completely soaked, you stop caring about the mission. Rain. Eleanor stood there, clutching her worn leather purse, looking like she had aged 20 years in a single day. The arrogant, screaming woman from the lobby was gone. She was just a broken, exhausted old woman. The room was dead silent. Mom? Hunter whispered. Eleanor ignored him. She walked slowly to the side of the bed. She gently reached out and touched sleeping Timmy's head, then bowed deeply to Tara. I am so sorry, sweetheart. Tara's eyes welled up. Don't, Eleanor. It's in the past. Eleanor shook her head. No, it's a sin I will carry to my grave. I didn't say a word. I just listened. Eleanor turned to me, her eyes red and puffy. Nat, you have every right to hate. To me. But I need you to know the truth. She sat down heavily in a chair, staring blankly at the wall. 2 years ago, when Hunter got his test results, he didn't tell you, but he told me. He came to my house in Ohio, fell to his knees, and sobbed. He told me he couldn't give you a child. He was terrified you'd leave him, take your money, and divorce him. I remained stoic. Eleanor wiped her tears. I know it was wrong, but I was just a desperate mother. I thought if we could just get a baby into the house, it would anchor the marriage. It would keep you around. So, I found Tara. Mom! Hunter yelled, horrified. You didn't have to tell her that. Eleanor snapped her head toward him, her eyes blazing with fury. Shut your mouth. I committed a terrible sin because I blindly loved you. But what you did is 1,000 times worse. I wanted a grandchild to save your marriage. You took that as an excuse to play the victim and cheat on your wife with half of Manhattan. You disgust me. Hunter stumbled backward, unable to speak. When outsiders judge you, you can argue. When your own mother damns you, there is no defense. Tara took a shaky breath. Nat, I agreed to the IVF. I needed the money for my mother. But halfway through the pregnancy, I realized what a monster Hunter was. I realized he had a wife who loved him. I wanted to back out. I wanted to give the money back and run. She choked on a sob. But my mother died. The room was silent. When she died, I had nothing left, Tara whispered. The doctors told me my body was too weak if I terminated the pregnancy. I might never be able to have kids again. So, I kept Timmy. I raised him myself. I never took another dime of Hunter's money. When he visited, I let him think the boy was his because I didn't want my son to grow up without a father figure. I looked at Timmy. He was clutching a beat-up toy car, sleeping so peacefully. We adults ruin our lives, and the shrapnel always hits the children. Right then, my phone rang. It was Kyle. I stepped out into the hallway. Nat, Kyle's voice was urgent. The finance team just flagged a massive anomaly. Someone is trying to wire $1.2 million out of the corporate reserve accounts right now. I narrowed my eyes. Who? The login credentials belonged to Hunter. I whipped my head around and looked into the hospital room. Hunter was gone. They say when a rat is backed into a corner, it either rolls over and dies, or it bites. Hunter had clearly chosen the latter. I felt a cold surge of adrenaline, not because of the money, but because I finally saw the absolute core of the man. He could cry, he could beg on his knees, but give him an inch, and he would steal your wallet while he was crying. I rushed back into the room. Eleanor was holding Timmy. Tara looked up, panicked. Nat, what's wrong? Where is Hunter? Eleanor looked confused. He just stepped out to use the restroom. I pressed the phone to my ear. Kyle, where is he routing it? 3 offshore shell accounts. If we don't freeze it in the next 60 seconds, it's gone. I closed my eyes for 1 second, then opened them. My voice was lethal. Freeze the accounts immediately. Call the bank, call the FBI field office. I'll be at the headquarters in 10 minutes. I hung up. Eleanor was staring at me, terrified. Did he just try to steal from the company? I didn't answer. Silence is the worst confirmation. I turned to leave, but Eleanor stood up and grabbed my sleeve. Her hands were shaking. Nat, I'm begging you. No matter what he did, please don't send my son to federal prison. I stopped. I looked at her and gave a sad, bitter smile. Eleanor, do you remember 3 years ago when Horizon was going bankrupt? She nodded slowly. If I hadn't bailed this company out, 3,000 people would have lost their jobs. People with mortgages, people with sick kids. If this company falls, it's not just Hunter who suffers. Thousands of innocent families suffer. I won't ruin my life, or theirs, out of pity for a thief. I pulled my arm away and walked out. My heels clicked, echoing down the long, sterile hallway, heavy and resolute. 2 hours later, I walked into the 36th floor boardroom at Horizon Enterprises. The air was thick with tension. Kyle was there. The CFO was there. The corporate counsel was there. Screens were displaying live banking feeds. Did you block it? I asked. Kyle stood up. We caught it. He managed to move about $50,000, but we froze the remaining $1.15 million. I exhaled, feeling my muscles unlock. Kyle handed me a folder. We also found this on his desk. I opened it and froze. It was an equity transfer agreement. The transferor was Hunter. The transferee was Mia. I stared at it and started laughing. This man truly never failed to disappoint. Even as his ship was sinking, his last instinct was to try and smuggle a lifeboat out to his pregnant mistress. There's one more thing, Kyle said softly. The authorities just flagged his passport. He was intercepted at JFK International Airport at Terminal 4. He was trying to board a red-eye to Geneva. The boardroom went quiet. I looked out the window. New York was still glowing, traffic still flowing, millions of people living their lives, completely unaware that a man's entire world was collapsing in Terminal 4. Where is he? I asked. Port Authority police are holding him in an interrogation room at the airport. I nodded. I'm going to see him. Because some chapters can't just be closed by lawyers. You have to shut the book. Yourself. There are marriages that end with a clean signature on a divorce decree. There are marriages that end in explosive screaming matches. And then there are marriages that died years ago, but the two people just kept walking around the house like ghosts, playing their parts. When I walked into the stark, fluorescent-lit interrogation room at JFK, my anger was gone. Looking at Hunter sitting handcuffed to a metal table, I realized that the person you should pity most isn't the one who got betrayed. It's the one who threw away a diamond to pick up a rock. Hunter looked up. His designer suit was ruined. He looked like he had aged a decade. Just hours ago, he was a CEO. Now, he was a felon waiting for transport. Nat, he croaked. I sat down across from him. The metal table separated us, but the distance between us felt like light years. We sat in silence. Finally, Hunter gave a broken, miserable laugh. You know, while I was sitting here waiting for them to book me, I kept thinking about the day we moved into our first apartment in Brooklyn. I didn't speak. I had nothing. I had a beat-up Honda Civic and a 400-square-foot studio. The roof leaked on the bed when it rained. The radiator was broken. But I was so happy. He wiped a tear from his cheek. Then I got money, and I felt empty. I got a company, and I wanted a bigger one. I had a good woman, and I looked for a better one. I chased, and I chased, and I chased. And now I'm sitting in a cage, realizing I'm the biggest idiot on earth. I looked at him, my voice completely flat. Hunter, some things you can lose and buy back. But some things, once they're gone, they are gone forever. He looked at me with desperate red eyes. Is there absolutely no way you can? Forgive me? I stood up slowly. Hunter, I forgave you 100 times. You just never knew. I forgave you when you lied about working late. I forgave you when I forgot our anniversary. I forgave you when you smelled like someone else's perfume. I stayed quiet because I thought everyone makes mistakes. But doing it once is a mistake. Doing it 100 times is a choice. Hunter put his head down on the metal table and wept. I didn't say another word. I turned and walked out of the room. A month later, Hunter officially resigned from Horizon Enterprises and forfeited his remaining equity. Through aggressive litigation, we clawed back the embezzled funds. I filed the criminal charges, but ultimately, I worked out a plea deal with the DA for extreme probation and full restitution instead of federal prison time. I didn't do it because I was soft. I did it because Eleanor had come to my office, gotten on her knees, and begged me. She didn't cry. She just said, I owe you a debt I can never repay. But please, let him try to rebuild a quiet life. Hunter liquidated his cars, his penthouse, and his watches to pay back the company. I heard that a few months later, he left New York entirely and moved to a small town in the Midwest, opening a hardware store with an old college buddy. No one really knows how he's doing, and no one asks. As for Tara, I set her up with a housing grant and paid for her medical treatments. Timmy is a sweet kid. He calls me Aunt Nat. Once, while we were eating pizza in the park, he asked me, Aunt Nat, are you going to have a baby? One day? I laughed. Probably. But I have to wait a little while. Why do you have to wait? I ruffled his hair. Because right now I'm just learning how to be happy. Again. A year later, Horizon Enterprises was thriving. The rot had been cut out, and the company was more profitable than ever. One winter afternoon, I was standing in my office looking at the snow falling over Central Park when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, but I knew who it was. Nat, thank you for not destroying me when you had every right to. I owe you my life. I looked at the text for a long time, then quietly locked the screen. I didn't reply. Some people walk with you for a long time, but they are only meant to be a chapter, not the whole book. People spend their entire lives thinking the most valuable things in the world are money, status, and the things they don't yet possess. But when it's all stripped away, you realize the most priceless thing is the person who held your hand when you had absolutely nothing. It's just a shame that some people don't realize it until the room is empty. Looking back, life is a lot like a long train ride. People get on, ride for a few stops, and get off. Not everyone who sits next to you is going to ride with you to the final destination. Time reveals a person's face, but tragedy reveals a person's soul. It's easy to love someone when you're sharing a slice of cheap pizza in a cramped apartment. But when you move to the penthouse, when the bank accounts swell, human nature gets tested. The hardest thing to maintain in this world isn't wealth, it's contentment. When we have nothing, we fear starvation. When we have everything, we fear someone else having more. We run, we fight, we cheat, only to turn around and realize we dropped our greatest treasure miles back down the road. Happiness rarely waits for us at the finish line of some grand rat race. It sits quietly in the mundane, a family dinner, a text that says, drive safe, a phone call from your dad asking how your day was. We ignore these things because they are quiet, but when they're gone, you can't buy them back with all the money on Wall Street. Speaking of parents, there's an old saying, raising a child is like a giving tree. The tree drops its leaves to feed the soil, slowly withering, so the sapling too can grow. When we are young, if we get a fever, our parents stay up all night in the stutter, terror. Yet when they grow old, when their backs ache and their memory fades, we brush it off as just getting old. If you still have parents to call, if you still have someone waiting for you at home, you are wealthier than most billionaires. Don't wait until the house is empty to miss the people who lived in it. Don't wait until the phone stops ringing to wish for a call. In the end, a successful life isn't about who made the most money or drove the best car. It's about turning around when you hit rock bottom and seeing who is still standing behind you. Be kind. Kindness might not make you rich, but it takes you far. The universe is a perfect echo chamber. What you put into it, you eventually get back. If you're reading this and you're near the people you love, hold them tight. If you're far away, call them. Life is brutally short. A few seasons pass and suddenly our hair is turning gray. So slow down, be a little kinder, forgive a nader brace a little more. Because at the end of the day, what warms your soul isn't what you have in your bank account, it's who you have by your side.